The 5 freedoms have been the basis of animal welfare since the 1960s. In 1964, Ruth Harrison wrote Animal Machines, which described the livestock and poultry practices at the time. In summary, the report stated that animals should have the freedom to stand up, lie down, turn around, groom themselves, and stretch their limbs. These were later expanded on to create a more detailed list of their needs. After Animal Machines exposed the suffering inflicted on farm animals, the UK government commissioned an investigation into these concerns. This led to the publication of the Bramble Report, led by Professor Francis Bramble, which was an investigation into the welfare of intensively farmed animals. This is now called the Animal Welfare Act 2006 and makes owners and keepers responsible for ensuring that the welfare needs of their animals are met. The 5 freedoms include freedom from hunger and thirst, from discomfort, pain, injury or disease, the freedom to express normal behaviour, and freedom from fear and distress. You must have a zoo licence to run a zoo, and may be forced to pay a fine without one. The Zoo Licensing Act 1981 requires inspection and licensing of all zoos in Great Britain. There are some exemptions where you would not require a zoo licence. These situations include zoos that don't have many different kinds of animals, and small zoos that have less than 120 animals. Unfortunately, if someone is running a small zoo or a deer park, their zoo will not legally need any inspections, which could result in poorer living conditions for the animals. There are a list of bodies, institutes and centres which are approved for intra-community trade in animals. This is called the BALI Directive and includes zoo, lab and even some pet animals. The BALI Directive tells you what you need to do in order to move certain animals that are not traditional livestock and their germplasm. There are many zoo organisations that zoos may opt to join which are dedicated to the care and conservation of animals and their habitats around the world. Some of these include the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, the European Association of Zoos and Aquaria, and the British and Irish Association of Zoos and Aquariums. The organisation's missions are to provide leadership and support for zoos, aquariums and partner organisations. A zookeeper's responsibilities usually include feeding, maintaining and cleaning the animals. Other responsibilities include diet preparation, behavioural observations, record keeping, exhibit maintenance and providing environmental enrichment for the animals. There are 4 main roles of zoos today. These are conservation, research, education and recreation. Conservation happens by protecting and breeding animals in captivity so that they do not become extinct. Research helps scientists understand why animals are becoming endangered before they can plan a conservation project. Education is important as it helps people understand why a species is threatened with extinction and what they can do about it. And recreation makes zoos fun to attract people, which helps raise more money for conservation. Record keeping is an essential part of being a zookeeper. There are many types of animal management and husbandry records, including keeper logs, curator reports, specimen reports, nutritionist records, veterinary medical records, and pathology records. ZIMS, which stands for Zoological Information Management System, is a web-based record-keeping system used to capture and organise husbandry information. It is used by zoos, aquariums and zoological associations. European Endangered Species Programmes, EEP, and the European Stud Books, ESP, aim at conserving healthy populations of animals while also safeguarding the genetic health of the animal. Some examples of poor welfare standards include visual observations such as no access to shelter, no toys or enrichment, and not enough space to roam around. There can also be behavioural indicators of poor welfare standards, such as altered levels of activity, apathy and hysteria, or hyperaggression. Some examples of a good welfare standard include access to anything the animal needs to stay healthy, a consistent and fresh supply of water, and an appropriate bed or shelter. In the wild, the preferred prey of the Scottish wildcat are small mammals such as mice, voles and rabbits. Rabbits can form up to 70% of the wildcat's diet in eastern Scotland, where the prey densities are high. They are incredibly stealthy hunters and often pounce on their prey after a long and patient wait. They use their excellent sense of smell, sight, and hearing to hunt, whilst their sensitive whiskers can also detect tiny movements around them. At Camperdown, the Scottish wildcats are usually fed chicks and rabbits, which are scattered around their enclosure to encourage their natural hunting behaviour. Rabbits are strung up from trees so that the cats have to climb and jump to acquire their food. This keeps them fit and healthy, whilst also making eating a game. Although it is mostly rabbits that are fed to the wildcats, it changes day to day to give them some variety in their diet. On Monday they are fed rabbit or squirrel, on Tuesday they are given chicks, and on Wednesday they are given a repeat of rabbit or squirrel. On Thursday they are given mice or quail, Friday is rabbit again, Saturday they get rats, and on Sunday they are given quail. Occasionally these are substituted for chicken, pigeon or pheasant. There are situations where uncharacteristic behaviours can arise with Scottish wildcats. An example of this is handling and interacting with humans. If the cats are to eventually be released into the wild, they must see humans as a threat and also not depend on them as a food source. A good way to prevent this from happening is to continue scatter feeding and to not touch the wildcats. Uncharacteristic behaviours can also be present in herbivores, such as birds. Birds being fed consistently from the same keeper may cause them to form an attachment with their feeder. They may become aggressive to the other keepers and indulge in self-destructive behaviour, such as pulling out feathers or refusal of food. A good way to prevent this is with minimal handling and rotating the zookeeper's schedules. It's advisable to avoid hand rearing, as the animal becomes dependent on their carer, which may cause survival issues in the future. They may also be ostracised by their species and face issues with mating. Uncharacteristic behaviours that may be noted with the wildcats include bar biting, pacing due to stress or not enough enclosure space, and over-grooming. Zookeepers can help prevent pacing by reducing the cat's stress levels by providing them with sufficient space and hiding areas out of the public view. Bar biting can be prevented by installing an electric fence or even using a glass enclosure. Over-grooming can be stopped by making sure the wildcats are not bored and have toys to stimulate them, such as scratching posts. I recorded many ethograms in my time at the zoo. This is one from the 9th of December 2020, before we had put the enrichment in the wildcats enclosure. As you can see, there were a lot of social behaviours, grooming and sleeping reported. Sleeping and eating appear to be the most prominent behaviours I saw when passing the wildcat enclosure. Based on this ethogram, my hypothesis was the introduction of the enrichment will result in an increase in locomotion and playing behaviours. There will also be a decrease in sleeping and eating, as the wildcats should be interacting with the enrichment. I used 3 before enrichment ethograms to work out the average for each behaviour. Some behaviours stayed at 0. However, I managed to get an average of 6.3 for playing behaviours, an average of 5.3 for eating, an average of 9.6 for social behaviours, an average of 2 for locomotion, an average of 0.3 for foraging, an average of 9 for sleeping, and finally an average 2 for grooming. This is an example of a welfare sheet. As you can see, it lists the most important things the zoo needs to provide in order to keep their animals happy and healthy, such as access to a vet when necessary and a suitable fence. The animals should have sufficient space, proper facilities, and company of the animal's own kind so that they can express normal behaviours. The animals should have a clean environment, which helps prevent them from getting sick and also makes the enclosure nicer to look at for guests. Everything on this welfare sheet is essential to the animal's health and happiness and should be provided by the zookeepers. Overall, Camperdown Zoo's welfare standards for all of their animals is very good, and they tick almost every box on the welfare sheet. Their animals are well taken care of and seem to be quite happy. Aside from just caring for the animals, they also have to keep records on their behaviours, what they are eating, the state of their health, and many other things. At the moment, the Wildcat's enclosure is rather small for the number of cats it is housing, as the zoo has limited space for each animal. This being said, Camperdown is currently in the process of building another Wildcat enclosure behind its current one. This one will be used to house kittens and means that the cats will have a lot more space than previously had, which is good. I think the wildcats and other animals throughout the zoo would benefit from more enrichments in their enclosures. There doesn't seem to be a lot of new toys put into their enclosures, and the toys they do have in at the moment seem to be from previous college students on this course. Aside from this, the wildcats do have access to a varied diet and water at all times, which is good. Their enclosure is also very realistic to their natural habitat, which is a bonus for the cats and visitors as it helps educate them on how they would live in the wild. They have multiple hiding spot options out of the public view if they don't want to be seen, and there are many shelters around the enclosure for them to hide. They are also surrounded by their own kind, which benefits them and prevents them from getting lonely and engaging in uncharacteristic behaviours. For our enrichment, we wanted to create something that the wildcats could enjoy and interact with for an extended period of time. We knew it had to be something that the wildcats would naturally be curious of, and we decided to put catnip into the enrichment to keep the cats' attention. We decided to use a strong wooden board as the base of the enrichment, as it would hold all the toys in place, whilst also being pretty sturdy and difficult for the cats to destroy and move. Plastic poles were propped up straight and glued to the wooden base, with colourful toy balls attached at the end. There were also a couple of toy feather mice, which were glued again to the base so that the cats would not discard them around the enclosure. Catnip was scattered on and inside the wooden base to attract the wildcats to the enrichment, just as it would attract your average house cat. With this enrichment, we were hoping to achieve an increase in playing amongst the cats and a decrease in sleeping, as it was likely they would be curious and investigating their new toy. Unfortunately, I do not have a video diary of the enrichment being built. However, I managed to film footage of the enrichment going into the enclosure for the first time and the cat's initial reaction to their new toy. When the enrichment was placed in the enclosure, there were a couple of cats watching us, wondering what we were doing. After scoping out the area for a couple of minutes, one of the cats eventually climbed down from a tree to investigate the new addition. The wildcat began to sniff the enrichment, and it became obvious right away that the catnip was having an effect. The cat was still unsure of its new surroundings, and sat on the wooden base with its mouth open, taking in the new scents for a couple of minutes. This is because the cats have something called a Jacobson's organ, which is a special sensory organ located in the roof of the mouth behind the front teeth. House cats also have this, so when your cat makes this strange face, it is normally because they have smelled something new or interesting, and it is drawing the scent into the Jacobson's organ to get a better smell. The wildcat then began to roll around and play on the wooden base. This was 100% a reaction to the catnip, as it's something I've personally seen in my own pet cats. After a short while, a second wildcat came over to the enrichment to investigate, and was also instantly drawn to the catnip. The wildcats definitely enjoyed the enrichment, as they played with it almost immediately, and continuously went back to it to keep playing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
As you can hear, the wildcats began vocalising once they were around the enrichment. This could have been because of the new smells, the catnip, maybe they were unsure, or perhaps they were trying to inform the other cats about the new enclosure addition. Unfortunately, the Wildcats seemed to love the enrichment so much that within the next couple of days, it was no longer standing. We're unsure as to what exactly happened, but we did find small pieces of the enrichment scattered around the enclosure, so it is fair to assume the wooden base was not as sturdy as we once thought. I was unable to get more than 1 ethogram after the enrichment was placed in the enclosure. As I mentioned, it was destroyed fairly quickly. However, I compared this ethogram with one of my previous ones to create a bar chart that would show the differences more clearly. As predicted, the playing behaviours increased dramatically after putting the enrichment in the enclosure. Locomotion also increased as predicted. Relating back to my original hypothesis, in conclusion, the hypothesis was very accurate. The playing average increased massively from 5 to 22, whilst the locomotion average increased from 0 to 7. The sleeping average also decreased from 5 to 0. However, the eating average remained at 0. I think, aside from the enrichment being destroyed rather quickly, it was a success. The Wildcats interacted positively with it, and it seems like if the base was stronger, they would have enjoyed keeping it in their enclosure permanently as a source of entertainment. I definitely saw the behavioural changes that I thought I would see, such as an increase in playing and locomotion. I did think the cats would take longer to adjust to the enrichment before interacting with it, but I was pleasantly surprised that they took to it straight away. I'm still unsure as to why they began vocalising once they saw the enrichment. I'm not sure if they were scared or happy, but it definitely was because of the foreign object in their enclosure. If I decided to run the enrichment again, I would need to use a firmer base and a stronger glue to secure the toys. I think the strongest base I could use would be metal, and then we could weld the metal bars that hold the toy balls to the base to stop it from being destroyed. However, I don't think this would be suitable to do at Camperdown or when we're not at campus, as we would need a welding machine to do this. I would also make sure to include the catnip again, as this seemed like a big factor in what interested the Wildcats to the enrichment in the first place. We didn't manage to get a lot of good hunter cam footage, so I thought I'd include these good couple of photos at the end. During my time in this course, I have really enjoyed learning about the wildcats and having the opportunity to see the other animals in the zoo every week. I liked working with my group as a team, and I am happy we were able to create such a successful enrichment for the cats. Thank you for listening to my documentary.